Okay, everyone. Hi, it's Dr. Ramani from my messy room, but I wanted to make sure I talked about this while it was still fresh in my mind. Since Succession went away, I've missed talking about television, but I have The White Lotus season 3, which is just chock full of narcissism. So every week, let's break this down because what's interesting about this, since we're starting together and meeting these characters for the first time, I may get it wrong as I sort of share what I think about who's showing narcissistic signs and who's not. Because as we know, sometimes we pick up some of these patterns and traits early on, but sometimes it takes a minute. And that takes a minute is actually going to be really a reveal for folks who say, I can see how I didn't get it in the beginning, but now I do. So let's talk a little bit about this. Season 3, episode 1 of White Lotus. You know, I love me some White Lotus. So we've got so just to sort of set the tone, and I don't remember anyone's name from this episode. Maybe over the weeks I will. But so who's coming in? Who's coming into this fancy resort in Thailand this time? It's the rich family with the three kids, the sort of master of the universe dad, and the completely sort of out to lunch, superficial mom. Then there's the couple with the angry man and the much younger British woman. Then there's the three friends who are coming. And then we have sort of some interesting people showing up. Someone from season 1 comes, the spa massage therapist, gifted sort of spa healer person who what we saw in season 1 is back. And another blast from the past we'll talk about in a minute. So as I watched this episode, and once again, I was pulled in as I always am on this show. The people who jumped out to me as having sort of the most narcissistic vibe won't surprise you. First of all, it's the overly sexualized bro sibling of that rich family, the tall one, who is just everything that comes out of his mouth is a dig. It's a teasing of his siblings. It's a putting down his brother. It's that constant sparring. And any of you who have ever had a narcissistic sibling knows the feel of that. And then there's that sort of hypersexualized, very superficial approach to sort of hooking up that he brings to everything. And even that hypersexualized, well, if I can't get the real thing, then I am going to have to get myself off. What we do know is that that role that sex plays in narcissistic relationships, that it's often a big presence in a narcissistic intimate relationship, but there's no depth to it, though it's often quite performative. It is interesting to watch him try to kind of dip his toe in the water of sort of who the people are and see who he can meet, who he can hook up with. But what was fascinating about that character is how much it was about gamesmanship, like how much was like who he's going to get and sort of trying to bring his brother into the dark arts of courtship by saying it's just a numbers game, which is such a narcissistic thing to say. So we're going to put him on the list. But apple never falls far from the tree. And his dad it has very much that feel again of that kind of master of the universe, obsessively working, money matters, contemptuous of the whole thing. But okay, if my daughter wants to do this project, then we're going to do it sort of first class. So you could see how, again, that confusion of what the narcissistic parent looks like to the world. Like, look how devoted he looks like. He spent all this money to bring his family on this vacation so his daughter could do this project. But there's a real tension. There's a tightly wound quality to him that relates to, again, you could even see how he's getting tense on the boat with another person we're about to talk about, how he kind of has that kind of thin skin, provocable sense of himself when he runs into that same character outside, the having to be on the phone, the kind of tense business dealings. He can never put it down. The entitlement when he's asked to put his phone in that little protective bag, like, oh no, hell no, I'm not putting my phone down, kind of thing. So we're going to put him on this narcissism list. But here's one that I think some of us may disagree with, and put in the comments if you do, is the mom, his wife. She once upon a time is I would have been described with a word I don't like very much, and that word is histrionic, which is I don't like it because it's a very woman bashing term. But what it really gets at is this pattern of her behavior, which we'll find a different word for, which is very superficial, emotionally superficial, kind of selfish and almost childlike, like she needs to be rescued. And yet she gets her little digs in. Like the one son is trying to figure out where to go to college, but It's still all about her. And there's this, again, this spoiled child's quality to her of, not really just sort of not having real responsibility, which in and of itself doesn't a narcissistic person make. But she has a very mild feel of narcissism. And I think she's a great example of what that mild narcissism could look like. She doesn't seem like a mean person or a bad person, but she definitely seems like a handful. She definitely seems selfish. And it definitely seems like this whole family tableau is very performative for her. So there's her. Okay. Of course, I'm sure many of you picked him out. The guy who has a sort of vulnerable meets malignant vibe, who's in the relationship with the much younger British woman. From the jump, he kind of feels like dirty and unshowered on that boat. And he has this young partner who he's very dismissive and contemptuous of. And he clearly has an agenda coming there. Now, they're definitely creating some foreboding and foreshadowing around him. He has even kind of a sociopathic vibe, and he's smoking on the boat, which you're not supposed to do, which creates tension with the master of the universe guy. And he clearly has some sort of thing that's going to happen, or he's obsessed about with the husband of the owner or the co-owner of the resort. So he seems like he's there on an agenda. He's very negativistic. That's where I'm getting at that vulnerable narcissistic piece. This place stinks. What the hell is this on this menu? So he's in this unbelievably beautiful place, but he's still really negative about it. That is something anyone who's ever been in a relationship of any kind with someone with vulnerable narcissism will say, no matter how fantastic the backdrop is, this is somebody who will still make it into a negative, miserable experience. And then he does something that's very much in that vulnerable, malignant wheelhouse. As annoying as his partner is, and she kind of is, it's nobody deserves to be treated like that. Annoyance is not a reason for somebody to be mistreated. And when he just doesn't like it anymore, he gets up and he leaves her, which is very common in these relationships. Anyone who's been left behind in a bar or in a restaurant, you know from where vulnerable and malignant narcissism meet. Like I said, he has almost a sociopathic vibe. And when we look at what comprises sociopathy, I'd really say it's where vulnerable and malignant narcissism meet. That's very likely that sort of sociopathic place. So he's a powder keg in a different way than the master of the universe guy is, but we're definitely putting, he definitely has that narcissistic vibe. That group of the three friends, okay, the three women who come together. What we have is like we have one woman who's clearly some sort of celebrity or movie star. I don't think it's fair yet to call her narcissistic. I think she sort of likes being famous and likes being very beautiful and attractive and, doing all the transformations. But as of now, this is the kind of person where you might say, like, if I'd met this person, I might say, this is a wait and see. But there's thus far, I don't think that's a fair term to at all use about her. I think she's come there, she's being generous to her friends. There's sometimes a little bit of a communally vibe, like, oh, I'm so successful, so I'm going to be so generous with you. So there's a little bit of that. But the one to watch is that friend who's drinking a lot, clearly has some resentment built up, is very competitive with the two women, and then goes in and has that kind of screaming episode when she goes back into their big shared villa, that there is definitely some sort of like passive aggressive, victimized head of steam building up there. I could be wrong about her, but I definitely have to say, like, she's giving me some red flags. Would I say go in all the way, say she really feels narcissistic to me? Not necessarily. There's something going on there, though, that I'd say that's red flags. I'd say the celebrity friend, I'm going to give that like a pink flag. So that's sort of like episode one's take. The ground is going to shift like this. And this is really meant to say, like, okay, these are obviously characters in an overly dramatized series. So this may not be real life. But every episode, I'm also going to opine on who I think was the one who was killed in this first episode, which obviously we're not going to find out to the end. As of this first episode, my hypothesis is that the person who was taken out and who we'll find out at the end was the one killed. This is my guess, is that it's the really lovely Thai woman who works at the resort and whose scooter broke down in the beginning. And then her friend, who was clearly attracted to her and into her, who was like a security guard or something, picks her up on his motorcycle, or he's maybe law enforcement or something, and takes her to the hotel. there's something rather obsessive about his focus on her. So I'd like to think he's a sweet guy because it has that vibe, but there's something there that's sort of not sitting well with me. And I think that she is there's a way that she's being with him that's bringing up some level of sort of shame and vulnerability. So that's my, I'm not even saying he's the one who did it, but for some reason something's vibing for me that I think she's the one we lose in this episode is her. So let's see. It'll be, well, we're going to go however many episodes the series is, and maybe someone will say, oh, you were so smart, or they're going to say you missed it all, and those people are not narcissistic. So anyhow, thank you, Mike White. Thank you, White Lotus. See, Mike White, White Lotus. There you go. So I'm going to keep watching it. It gives me something, keeps me out of trouble on Sunday nights, and love to hear your thoughts. But that's how that's shaping up. Let's see if these hypotheses are right, or if even these red flags turn into something brighter, or if they fritter out. Hope you enjoy the series. I know I have so far. Bye.